audio history done with the means of a video camcorder to trace the memories of the participants in the family of Louis and Jenny Kasper, who were parents of 6 children: Beatrice, my mother, Philip, Max, Joseph, Sam, and Elizabeth Kasper. I will attempt to record the memories of the principal parties, the children, tracing the family history as their memories at this point allow them to bring them to the camera and to sound. Your narrator is Edwin J. Shinitsky, born October 11th, 1932. Well, as we look at the picture, I'd like Dee, my mother, to tell us, what was the event?
Of this picture?
Yeah.
Well, in our lives, we thought we should have a family picture. We didn't have a family picture.
Was there any reason that the picture was taken? Or was it just the time of a family taking a picture?
That's all that I know.
Do you know how old you were in this picture?
No.
How old were you?
I don't know, maybe about 20. And Phil's about 18 or 17.
Well, Phil is only a year younger than you, isn't he?
18 or 19.
Okay, so you don't know when it was taken?
He's almost 2. We're 15 months apart, I think.
So you're thinking now that that picture was taken when you were about 20, so that would be in about 1925?
Possibly.
Your sister Libby is there. Do you know how old your sister Libby was in this picture?
Libby was about 7, 8 years old.
Okay, and Libby is your youngest sister and the youngest child of Louis and Jenny Kasper, is that right?
Oh, no.
No? Who is the youngest?
Sammy Kasper.
Oh, Sam is the youngest one.
And 2 died in between.
So there were 2 other children. There was a boy by the name of Abby.
Abby.
And there was another?
Abby was older, I think, than Libby.
And then there was another boy whose name was what?
Harry.
Harry and...
Harry was a year older than Sam. He would have been a year older than Sam.
So he would have been the next to youngest.
And he was circumcised. That's why I didn't even want to look at but I saw everything. But
You're talking about just the other day, Jason David Silverman was circumcised as he reached his 8th day. Is that right? That's the circumcision you were just talking about. But your brother Harry died as a result of a bad circumcision when he was an infant. Well, tell me a little bit about this picture now as you're looking at it. We were talking first about your brother Sam.
Sammy?
Yes.
I gave him the money for the suit. I bought him the suit.
You mean the suit he's wearing?
Huh? Yes. That's an all-wool sailor suit.
I see.
And that's a store. I worked for Irving Mann. And then when he was 15 years old, he worked for Irving Mann.
Oh.
You hear? But Irving Mann was so Jewish. And I worked for him when I was 17 years old. And my God, what he wouldn't do. He made Ma crazy. I walked out on him before Easter.
Why are you... Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Libby now. Elizabeth.
Elizabeth didn't work until she was about 18 years old.
I see. Well, what is the first thing you remember about Elizabeth?
Well, I can tell you, I remember as a baby, and I remember she had a beautiful black carriage. Beautiful.
You mean a buggy?
Not a
carriage.
Carriage. And she had a fur blanket,
okay.
A white.
Who next is in that picture?
Who next? Sammy, and the kids grew up so fast. This here.
Well, tell me a little bit about the man and the woman, your mother and your father. Who are they?
who were there?
Tell me their names.
My mother was Jenny Pernitsky Kasper.
About how old is she in that picture? Do you have any idea?
Well, she's not too old. If I'm
You were
about
20. So, and how about your father? What was his name?
His name was Louis Haskell.
Casper.
Casper, Laser Haskell.
And do you know where you were living when this picture was taken?
Where we were living?
Yes.
In Chicago.
Were you living in the north side or the west side?
We were living in the west side, Eddie. A very, very terrible west side.
How many brothers and sisters did your mother have, if you remember?
My mother had about 3 or 4 sisters. One was supposed to come to America.
Her name was Mirka?
Yeah.
That would be
That's the one you met.
That would be Tanti Mirka?
Mirka. And she was on the boat. She was ready to come off. But they found out that Pa was only here less than 6 months. His boss, the big boss, the Leatherman, signed for him to let her in, and he paid for her. And they changed their mind, and they made her go back.
So she had to return to Russia. And she was in Russia throughout the Second World War. And then I had the good fortune to meet her
what do you think?
in Israel in 1978, where she was living with her daughter, which would be your first cousin, Ida or Idka, who have now come to the United States, and we understand they're living in Brooklyn or in New York.
Yeah,
and how about other than America? Was there any other family that your mother had?
America? Oh, yeah.
They had family that lived in the Boston area? Someone by the name of Penny or Penn?
Penny. She had a brother, and she never saw him, but...
Never saw him again after she left Europe. Now, what about
They used to write, and they used to... and he had a brother-in-law.
Who's he?
My mother's brother, and he come to Chicago, and he was an elk, and he used to take me. I was maybe 16 or 15, so he used to take me downtown to their conventions. You know, when they see young girls. So I had the best time. They'd give you good things to eat, and then the men, they all made me crazy. You know, you're young and you look good. So I look like that picture up there when that picture was really too bad. That picture can't come out of there, you know. It's stuck and it's all paper.
All right, so then what about your father? Did he have a large family? He had a brother, didn't he? His brother was Julius? Yudel?
Yudel, he had a lot of brothers, but I think I really don't remember too much about his brothers.
But you remember one brother for sure.
Who?
Yudel?
Yudel, sure.
Uncle Julius, who had a wife whose name was Tanti Esther.
Yeah.
We used to call her Tanti.
Tanti's the devil.
And
she made a lot of trouble for Pa.
And Tanti had a large family, Tanti and Uncle Julius?
They had 7 daughters, and they had 2 sons.
2 sons?
One son got drowned, and she blamed it on Pa. She blamed it on my father all her life. Oh, she mean. You don't know how mean my aunt was.
Well, I remember that you used to have her visit. She would come to the house, and she was a widow and visited.
Because look at Eleanor, my cousin Eleanor. You know, she's when you ever make up your mind to go to, where's the...
Florida?
Florida. You have to get this from Phil.
That's your brother Phil. Now, let's go back a little bit again. What did your mother do as a young person? Did she have any skills or
My mother was a good sewer.
A seamstress? Did she work for others as
Well, wait a minute. So when Tomty was a neighbor, Tomty, Uncle, when see, Pa was in in France, they had the big tanneries, and the whole family of Pa's and uncles were tanners. Uh, but they were excellent. They were very good.
like chemists?
Yeah, but Pa was more of a chemist than all of them. But my Tomty, they would never admit that because she had it in for Pa all her life because he married my mother.
Do you know when your...
Wait a minute, I want to tell you something. Ma was 15 years old, and she went with Tomty. And she didn't go with Tomty to stay with her kids. She went with Tomty in the evening, she would say, but she went to be a seamstress because she was a wonderful sewer and she wanted to become a real good seamstress. And she was young, so that's what she wanted. But Tomty's, I told you, she's a very shrewd, what you call it, a shrewd, what do you call those shrewdies? And that's the kind of a woman she is.
Okay, but let's go on then. Then your mother met your father. Where did they meet?
In Tomty's house.
Where was that?
In Paris.
In Paris. Were they then married?
Well, first you have to meet and you have to know each other a little bit, but they didn't meet and marry right away.
Uh-huh. Well, what happened? Tell me about their courtship. Do you know anything about it? Their dating?
Well, he came to the house, he saw her, he thought she was a very nice-looking woman and a nice-looking girl. And then as he came, he kept liking her more. And he really started to like her.
Mm-hmm. So you were born in 1905, weren't you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. July 21st.
Why wasn't it 7 or 8?
Well, it could have been 2.
Yeah, well, so it would be.
So how long were they married before you were born?
Not too long. Mm-hmm. Because when he left for America, he left her in France.
Mm-hmm.
He could have left her there, right? But he didn't. He really didn't have the money to take her.
So he went to America by himself.
No. He was sent from that big factory to America, and it didn't cost him a cent. And then they told him they'll send for his family. They didn't know if he had children or not. And that's what they did. In a couple months, they called, and Ma went with him with herself,
mm-hmm.
and me.
Mm-hmm. And you say me, what do you mean?
She was pregnant already.
You mean she was pregnant and carrying you when she took her journey to America?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I see.
And I'm so glad I got here without being born there, you know.
So you were born in the United States then?
In Utica, New York, I think you know.
In Utica, New York?
Yeah.
You don't know how long you stayed in Utica, New York?
Well, until, no, because Phil was born.
But you were only a year and a half old or 2 years old when Phil was born.
And they lived in Water Villette already.
Water Villette in New York?
Uh-huh.
You think that's where Phil was born?
That's where the factory was, I think so.
Uh-huh.
But in Utica, New York, Ma came, and the people that she made friends with, she had all the way through they lived in New York.
Mm-hmm.
They were
So
so crazy about it.
So then your next oldest brother, who would that be in the picture?
Joe.
Joe and Max is there too?
Max is here, yeah.
Uh-huh. So Joe is the next oldest.
Joe was born about 2.5 years after Phil. And he was born also in Water Villette. And we lived in a house where the porch is on the ground.
No step, it was just a platform?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How old were you then? You must have been 4 or 5 years old. And you remember that? If he's 2.5 years younger than Phil?
On the side of our house, I don't know, there was a door to go out from one of the bedrooms, a little square, and there's a straight step that goes all the ways down. Sayers.
You remember this? It's not Michigan City now. You're talking about...
Yeah, I'm talking about New York when I was so little.
Okay.
And you know what?
Know what?
My brother Joe, I wasn't there, right there. I don't know where I was, maybe around the house or helping Ma or something. And my brother Joe fell down all those steps.
Is that right? Do you remember helping him?
Do I remember? I sure do.
Okay, now tell me, what about Max now? Where was he born?
Oh, where was Maxie born? Oh, Maxie, from there, from Ohio, we moved during, we went to meet Pa. He was coming in from New York to oy vey, am I forgetting like that? Oh my God. What's the name of that little town we lived in?
In what city? What state?
That's what I'm trying,
Is that in Ohio?
in Ohio. In
Adrian?
No. Adrian, that's Adrian, Michigan. I'll never remember.
Okay, what's your first memory of Joe or Max?
Well, Max was born at night, and my mother was home, and I went with whoever was going to meet Pa. I always had to meet my Pa. I loved my father like you, I don't know, I couldn't love anybody more. And when I saw him come off the train, I'll never forget either, because my father's there. And then,
what did you call your father?
Huh?
What did you call him?
Pa.
Pa?
And my mother, when we got home, I don't know if the baby was born yet, and you know who was with them? I don't think you know them. You know some of them. Do you remember Eva Witzer?
Of course I remember the Widsors. They lived in Ohio.
Yeah, but there's a lot of Widsors. This was the little Widsors.
Now, if someone were to look at our family tree, that was made by a Widzer, wasn't it? One of the Widzer young men, Jerry Becker.
Jerry Becker.
And Jerry Becker is a Widzer, and he made a family tree which shows that the Kaspers and the Widzers were cousins who married cousins, families that
Our grandfather and their grandmother, or one of our grandmothers, married their grandfather.
And that's shown on the family tree.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what about Max? You told us Joe fell...
When you took it out, didn't you find an envelope?
Joe said he fell and hurt him. You said Joe fell and hurt himself while he was in Waterville in New York.
Yeah,
what about Max? Do you remember anything about Max? Your first memories of him as a young boy? Or your young brother?
Little one?
Yeah, when he was a little fellow.
Well, he used to fight with a lot of kids and a lot of older ladies. He was Jewish and not too many. We were maybe 3 families in the whole town that were Jewish. This is truth. And Phil and I never had trouble if they called us a Jew. This is right. But Maxie had trouble. And you know, when the lady called him a sheenie, first of all, he didn't know what a sheenie was. And he turned around and say to her, "You're a sheenie, not me. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not a sheenie. You're a sheenie." And
how do you know that? Did he tell you that?
Yeah, he kept repeating it. He was mad.
And how long did you live in this Ohio area? Do you remember?
Long time. Long time there.
Well, how much older is Libby? How much older is Max than Libby? Your sister Elizabeth. Because Elizabeth was born in Michigan City, Indiana, and Sam was also born in Michigan City, Indiana.
Chicago.
Oh, Sam was born in Chicago.
He's the only one born in Chicago.
I see.
Born on Spalding Avenue.
How old were you when you moved to, you yourself, when you moved to Chicago? Do you remember?
I wasn't any more than 11 or 12. I don't think I was 12.
Were you still in elementary school? Did you go to elementary school in Chicago?
I graduated. This way. I graduated. Gee, what's the name of that school?
Well, there was a school called Manly. Did you go to Manly?
No,
Or?
that Manly School is a high school.
Oh.
Livy and Sammy went to Manly.
And I think Joe went to Crane, didn't he?
Crane is a...
Technical school?
It's higher than a high school.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there another one? For 2 years instead of college. Isn't it? Manly? Do you know nothing?
No, I was asking what school you thought you went to, if you remember.
I didn't go to college.
No, but you go to grammar school or a high school?
I went to high school a year, a year, and that's all. I couldn't go. I had to work 3 nights a week, and I was making money, and our family needed the money because my father lost his job. My father, instead of getting rich, things went upside down. My father could have been like Rebecca's uncles, the Superior Tanners. They're one of the richest companies, and that's what Pa should have been. But
right.
He didn't have the push, and he didn't have anybody to help him.
Okay, now after a while, you...
Tanti wouldn't. Later, see, Uncle lived in his house and he worked in his house. Mm-hmm. My father always had a place. He worked in a business. But when they got to know what he knew, they didn't need him.
Well, tell me a little bit about your cousins in Ohio. Who were they, the Widsors?
Well, you know what? I forgot an awful lot about
Well, you remember Mary Tace. She was a close
Mary
friend.
Mary was my closest cousin. And Mary is also bad. She's worse.
Well, we're talking now in the history, Mom, not today.
Yeah.
And there is another family. There is a...
There's everybody, but someone's got to get me going because
Did you remember Mary?
Who's Mary? Just Mary was talking about?
Yeah, Mary Tace. You remember the Tuckers?
Tucker, that's the...
Who are you telling me?
Sadie.
Sadie?
Sadie Lieberman.
And Sadie Lieberman, Tucker, was a cousin to Mary Tace also, wasn't she?
Well, sure, but isn't that something? Who's mother and father?
And then you remember your very good cousins, Sam and Ben Widzer, the dentist, Dr. Widzer.
Yeah. Lil Widzer.
Lil Widzer was the wife.
Yeah. But where are you seeing all that?
Hmm?
Or you remember all that?
I'm just asking you to remember what you can.
Lil and Ben, they got married and they came to Chicago for their wedding, to spend their honeymoon. And they were so crazy about Ma. This is the truth. And every year that they went on a vacation, they came to Chicago. And Ben was one of the nicest people you want to know. And he, for a doctor, you'd think he'd go someplace else. And she was so nice too. But I don't know, in her last years, well, her family's grown. Her sons are all doctors.
All right, we're going to come to an end of this storytelling.
Okay.
And we'll resume it at another time. To attempt to fill in the history, this is a picture of both...
beautiful.
And they're with their daughter Beatrice, or Bessie as she was named. And that would have been in 1905. This photograph is the photograph of Louis Kasper's father, Yitzhak, and his wife as they looked in Europe, in Russia. And we'll fill in more details as time progresses in this video-audio history. All right, this is Mother's Day, and for some reason, Jason is giving Father a kiss.
I love you, Papa. You do
I
everything.
think we ought to show the date. This is May 13th, 1990.
Shannon David.
And young Jason is entering his 3rd week. He's
2 weeks and 5 days.
There'd be the crown.
How long he is. Isn't he beautiful?
You don't like this,
You're
do
a
you?
big boy.
Look at this, right?
You can't decide if you should yawn or cry.
Go to sleep.
Oh boy.
You're such a joy, aren't you?
Yeah.
Hit me in the face again. Ooh, make a fish.
Don't show Daddy you got so wonderful lungs.
Oh, yeah. Fine. Why are we crying? Let's decide. Why are we crying? You don't know? You don't
Right,
know?
you can hear sounds.
You know,
You don't know.
look at the fork
Why are
in
you
front of
crying?
me.
Why
No,
are
I
you
don't
crying?
want to do
Why?
it, so help me.
Why?
We don't like to see her back. Let's turn around.
As long as we're hearing Grandma, we might as well see her on Mother's Day, May 13th, 1990.
That's so funny.
At the mother who's celebrating her
mother.
first
The newest
Mother's
mother.
Day.
Let's see, Mama.
We can go over
How
here.
does it feel?
Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
I never thought of myself as a mother. It's taking years to think of yourself that way, too. Take my word for it.
Exactly right.
You tell him.
Aren't I?
And he's taking care of the baby.
Tell him. He's not crying and starting to choke me. What a lovely boy. Well, I know you're hungry.
Ooh, he's losing
Hungry?
his hair.
Is he?
Yeah, in the back a little bit. You're gonna be bald. You're gonna be a bald baby.
Let me see. Let's see.
Always have to tell Jason, the Lord made some beautiful... I think we'll have a chance to see the grandfather taking pictures of the father.
Whenever Ed gets that voice, you know it's now the camera's on.
When you get a great grandma.
Don't look. Don't look. Do not
That's
look.
really
Remember, you have to
something.
learn this. Never look at Grandpa's camera. Look at the beautiful chair. Look at the beautiful chair. It looks like little lambs. Don't look that way. Don't look. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Now just stick your tongue out there. Like that. Like that.
Crazy man.
What's he doing to him?
He's acting so silly.
Look at
It's wonderful.
Jason, give your father a banana so he'll feel at home.
Like that.
Hoo, hoo, hoo.
There you go. I'll do it to him.
Great
Oh, what a young guy.
grandma. I'm not a great grandma. I'm 3 times.
Happy Mother's Day, Jason.
This is just.
How about grandmother?
You got a longer tongue than your
I
father.
left David out. I'm sorry.
Mother, go sit on the...
Kiss me?
Jason and David. Don't leave my David out.
You're kissing me.
And here is what it
I didn't realize I had the recorder on.
that every day.
Look at the young family enjoying their first
more
Mother's
and
Day.
more.
With the
Have a
background
happy
talking.
Mother's Day. Enjoy.
Just ignore him, maybe he'll go away.
Oh, here comes a big yelp.
I'm a great grandmother.
You're still hungry.
All these of us love you
Hi, honey bunny.
very much.
To breast. Urge to
Oh, here
feed.
they go, here it
Urge to
goes.
feed.
Urge to feed.
Lisa, Mom.
He's feeling a little hungry.
Still a little hungry?
Hey,
You still a little hungry?
Over 18. 16 and 18.
cause look at how skinny your brothers are. What's the matter with them? They didn't grow up yet. You're not that much older either.
Yeah.
None of us is so much older. But I was a big, husky lady. And then I got thinner later. But growing up, I was thinner.
Well, I was never heavy.
My either.
I wasn't heavy. She was shorter.
Oh, she was round. Where'd you get that? The camera then.
Okay. We're going to start talking a little bit where we had left off in our discussion of the Kasper family history.
So where'd
And,
you find it?
Today is May 20th, 1990, and my mother, Beatrice, has been joined by her brother Philip, who we've talked about before in the family picture. And Philip is holding the family picture. And how are you today, Uncle Phil?
Oh, just fine.
All right, I thought we would give you an opportunity to reflect a little bit about the photograph, which forms the basis of our recollection. Tell me what you recall in relation to the reason for the picture and about how old you were and about when that picture was taken, if you recall.
Well, I remember that they were always pictures where weren't taking those days too often. And I remember my father used to say, we ought to take a family picture. And I think this was the result of the family picture.
So you were about how old there?
I would say I was about 17, 18 years old at that point.
Okay, and when were you born, Phil? What was your birthday?
March the 12th, 1907.
All right, so this would have been then roughly in 1924 that this picture would be taken, 1925?
Yeah.
Do you remember what your father's business was at that time?
Oh, it was rough. He wasn't in any business. He was making a very, very hard living.
And at that time you hit...
we came to Chicago from Michigan City in 1918. It was right during the World's War.
What kind of a profession or business or trade did your father have?
He was an expert tanner.
Would that be like a chemist, a person familiar with leather and...
chemistries and dyes, and he had a very extensive knowledge of dyes and leathers, all the way back from Europe, Paris, to United States.
How old do you think your father was in that picture? Do you have any idea of that?
Picture? I never knew him. He's not old, is he?
What kind of a guess can
Well,
we
if you were 17, about how old was your father when you were my mother Beatrice, who was about 19 in that picture?
19 or 20, I don't know.
My father must have been about 39, 40 years old.
So he'd be about 22 years, 23 years older than you were.
I would get it approximate, yeah.
And Mom, how old do you think he was when you were born then? About 20?
Oh, Pa?
Yes, your father.
Well, how much older?
Wait a minute, Pa was older than Mom. Pa was, I think,
Much
7
older
years
than
older
Mom.
than Mom.
About
Seven.
7 years, 6 years.
7 years older.
Mom was 17 years older than me.
She got married when
16.
she was 15 or 16 years
Yeah.
old.
Where did that marriage take place?
In Paris. Paris, France.
And do you know how your parents met? That was Jenny and Louis Kasper?
Yes, the story goes back to my mother being a
Sewer. She used to sew.
yes, she did a lot of dressmaking and sewing, but she was a house.
No, she wanted to become a seamstress. So she went to Paris with Tante. She was her neighbor.
Was she a?
She's going to be a babysitter for Tante?
No, she didn't want to be a babysitter, but my aunt.
I know you've told us about that already, Mom. I'd like to see what Uncle Phil remembers.
That's a common night.
All right, well, let's go on. I think you knew her as a seamstress or someone a dressmaker. She had skills in that at the age of 14 or 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a sister whose name was Mirka. And Mirka did not come to the United States except for a landing on a boat and was rejected and was returned to the Soviet Union or to Russia. Is that right?
That's right.
And
Pa's boss, did I tell you? Signed for her.
yeah, you told us that already, Mom. You remember
And
that?
said that he'd let her off. He'd allow her, he'd take care of her until she got here and everything.
All right, but we've talked about that before. That's why I'm asking you to be more a listener today, okay?
Yeah.
Now, Phil, do you know where your father, Louis, was born?
Valkamir.
And that's a town in what's now Poland, Russia?
Yeah, Russia.
And it's
If I had
Valkamir.
known these questions, of course, I could have brought along some of the papers which would verify the...
Okay, we'll get a chance to
conversation.
talk again about it, but you recall that a town of Valkamir. What about your mother? Where did your mother come from?
Lithuania.
Suvalk.
Suwałk is now in Poland, in the country of...
Lithuanian she was, I think.
Yeah, but
Mom, do you know the Suwałkers organization?
We knew it well.
Well, why was she in the Suwałkers, Suwalk organization?
Because she was a Suwalker.
Then she came from the area called Suwałk.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's in Poland. During the period, and there's a lot of political activity going on now, stemming back to the period of the 1900s when the borders of Poland and Lithuania and Russia were changing frequently. People one month would be in Lithuania and the next month they'd be in Poland. The ruling government would change, but the town remained the same, and it would be a question of the political power at the time.
wasn't that at the time of the Tsar?
Absolutely, in the pre-1900s.
I remember you talking about pogroms and things of that sort.
What did you hear about the pogroms?
Well, the fact that the Jewish people were taken out of their homes many times, and there was a tremendous amount of discrimination against Jewish people.
Anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism. And they suffered constantly from the from this regime.
Would that be abuse then, that they were always subject to being beaten and or penalized financially? Now, the
Polish people do too.
the family of your mother, do you recall her maiden name, her family name?
Yeah, Pernitsky.
Okay,
Pernitsky.
and did she have a large family besides her sister Mirka?
No.
I don't know too much about the background of my mother at all.
Did you hear something about the family called Penny that lived in Boston?
Yeah, sure.
Were they related? Was that a derivative?
That was a
Her brother was Penny. The one brother.
I remember a name of Sam Penny. Do you remember Sam Penny?
That came here, a young fellow. Remember the young fellow that came here and he was a soldier?
Do I remember Maury?
No, Sam was the only name I knew, and
Sam?
And then Pennies, and then...
would there have been an uncle of yours that lived in the East, in Boston, in that area that...
What was the name of the town? You know that I can't believe
What,
it.
in Boston?
In Massachusetts.
Yeah, that was
What's wrong? Well, I can't remember a lot of things now.
yeah, I know.
Do you remember?
All right, it'll come back to us, but
the name was
there's Lawrence, there's Lowell.
Lowell? Yeah, Lowell, huh?
All right, rather than guessing about that, if we just go back now that when they left the
Lowell, Massachusetts.
the residence of Suwałk, and Mom, Mother,
always came here, and he took me to the Elks Convention.
Nut Price.
No, and the man downtown, they always wanted to touch me in the toes because, you know, I was about 16 years old then.
Yeah,
And you get this-
Italian origin.
What was his name? Penny?
No, that was he had a son too that was in the radio business.
They were stuck
At
up.
that time.
all right, you haven't had any contact with these people for long years, is that right? There was also a question I was going to ask you, though, is that if your father came from Valkamir and your mother from Suwałk, do you have any idea how they met, how they came to know one another, how the families tied together?
How we found them?
He met her. He met her. I think through my aunt's house.
That would be your Aunt Esther,
Yeah,
who was married to your Uncle Yudel or Julius.
Julius,
Julius was your father's brother,
older brother.
one of your father's brothers.
Older brother.
How big a family did your father have?
Are they the only brothers? There was another brother, Udall.
Shalem.
Shalab or Udall?
No, Yudel and Julius are the same one, man.
Oh, then it's Shalab.
Shalem, and then he had two sisters. I think it was 5 or 6.
You never met those sisters?
No.
Would one of those sisters have been the grandmother of the Flats, like Leah Flat? Leah Flat, who lives in
Mother.
in
The
Canada, her mother.
Her name was Peshka. Wait.
Her mother was a sister. to my father.
Okay, so the relationship of the Kasper family through the brother and sister relationship of your father and your aunt, whose name you think was Pesha? Leah's mother.
Leah's mother was like, not Fisher, but...
Is it Aaliyah or Lena? Marvin Flatt
Why don't you ask
is
Marvin?
one of the three children of Leah and Max Flatt, and Leah Flatt, who lives in Toronto, is a first cousin of both you, Phil, and my mother, Beatrice, and her children were Marvin and Belle, or are Marvin and Belle Flatt, who were twins, and their older daughter was Debbie, or Ida,
Debbie called
and her name is now Beatrice, and Debbie has two sons, and Marvin has two sons and one daughter. His sons are Jonathan and Michael, and a daughter, Bonnie. So they're really your first cousins.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when they were married in Paris, they met one another through your Aunt Esther, Tanti. Tanti had a number of children, didn't she? Tanti and your Uncle Julius.
Yes.
They had 7 daughters and 2 sons.
Is that right, Uncle Phil? Do you remember that?
7 daughters and 2 sons.
I only knew Joseph Kasper. He spelled his name P-A-R, Kaspar. And he lived...
Change that over here in America.
Okay, now, how did the Tanti Esther and your father meet? Was Tanti Esther already married to Julius at the time that your father came to Paris?
Oh, my. Sure.
Yeah.
They were married. They had kids already.
Well, do you know how your mother came to be in the household of your Aunt Esther before she met and married your father?
She was a neighbor next door.
In Paris? I was just curious how your mother got to Paris.
Because Tanti, she liked her, and she...
Well, did Tanti know your mother in Suvalk?
Yeah, and she thought Tanti came from Suval too, but Tanti is a user. She thought that she could take advantage of my mother. Well,
You told us about that last time we talked, Mom, but I'm interested in Uncle Phil's recollection.
Well, I know my father stayed at their house for quite a while.
That would be your Uncle Julius,
yes.
and his...
He stayed there, and I think it was in that time that he stayed there that he met my mother.
All right, I was just curious. The thing I have never been able to connect is did Esther come from Suvalk, and did she meet your mother there and bring her to Paris, or did someone introduce them?
I don't know Esther's background, excepting that she came from a family called Browarskis.
The Browarskis.
That was her maiden name was she was a Browarski.
And she had a lot of ego.
And they were a what we would kind of consider
comfortable family?
Idea of a high-class family.
When you say high class, you mean by wealth?
Well, they were sort of.
She thought anyway.
What would be the word? They were sort of snobbish.
I mean, they felt they were upper class in the sense of economics.
A superior feeling, yeah.
Were they better educated than the Kaspers?
Well, Tanti was pretty educated, maybe.
And we're talking of an era when
I would have to say possibly, yes.
People were married very young, because you said your Uncle Julius had married Esther. And I assume they married in either Valkamir or in Suvalk.
So that I couldn't say, because I have no idea.
Can you take this off there?
See, we never had any of those relatives come here where we would have met them, so we could have furthered our knowledge of their earlier life. We never saw our grandfather or our grandparents. We heard of them.
never had an aunt and uncle besides that.
That was the only uncle that we knew of.
Or anybody.
Was Uncle Julius.
Well, and what we were talking about the last time we were filming was the picture of your grandmother and grandfather, who are in the two-person photograph that we saw at the time of our last viewing, and they are in a picture which my mother has in her apartment. Do you remember the names of your grandfather and grandmother? Jacob?
Jacob was his name, and Her name, damn it.
Isn't that terrible? So close.
All right, and then also there's a picture that we have
She was crazy about it. She saved her life.
just next to that picture. That's your mother and father holding your sister B. Is that the picture of the three people?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And B looks
Yeah.
to be under 6 months old, I guess,
About
at that
6
time.
months.
Yeah, must have been taken, that was taken in the United States, of
Oh,
course.
sure.
Yeah.
Hey,
Also, at those times, they were, as you can tell from the photograph, those are all posed pictures. Those are not occasions.
They would go to a
The
photographer and they...
he would
Mom,
flash those big powder guns at him.
Be like going to a wedding. They would go to a photographer to have a picture taken.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, now...
This was their proud baby, so they...
they say I was beautiful. We're talking about proud. You can see it.
Don't cut her short, Uncle.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I was. They said.
All right, now they came to America then in about 1905, roughly. Because my mother was born in 1905,
Yeah.
and she was born shortly after they arrived.
For Christ's sake, wow.
So when they arrived, they went to a town called Watervliet. You know that town, or what town did?
Utica. I was born in Utica. You were born in Watervliet and Joe.
Do you know the town you were born in, Uncle Phil? Did
Yeah,
they
I
ever
was
tell
born
you?
in, no, I was born in Utica.
Were you?
Yeah, we were both born in Utica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not.
All right, you don't have any memory, obviously, of that time, and then I understand your family moved to a town called Watervliet.
Watervliet. Joe was born in Watervliet.
Yeah, and he fell down the flight of stairs. We had a
Well, let's let Uncle Phil tell us a little bit about you. Do you have any memory of
Well,
Watervliet?
the only memory I have of Watervliet is territory that we were fooling around. I remember at one time we were fooling around. There were some rocks that we had moved, and I had my hand up holding one of the rocks, and Joe or whoever we were playing with had let go, and I had cut a deep gash in my finger.
Let's see that finger.
It's
Mom,
gone
Mom.
now. And that is the only memory I have of that as kids.
I see. Now, was Max born in Watervliet, or where was Max
was
born?
born in Larry, Ohio.
Leary, Ohio. Where and how, what was your father doing at this time? What was his business?
There, he's going
Well,
down already.
He started out in Utica working for a...
No, in Utica he was with a company. They sent him.
Mom,
What is
let
Utica.
Uncle Phil talk, okay?
He came in with Revelon Frères, who had an interest in his knowledge of dyes.
And making
And,
Cordovan leather.
Huh?
To make Cordovan leather, he was an expert.
Well, that was after. This was come. And from there, he got connected with a company called G.W. Wiffenbach.
Oh, that's right.
Like W.I. Wiffenbach?
Wiffenbac.
And that was in New York or in Ohio?
No, that was in New York.
Okay.
This Wiffenbach Tannery Company had a strong interest in him because his knowledge of Cordovan leather, which is a very small area of the horse's butt. And this is where the only area that you get Cordovan from, so it was limited.
Why don't you take up
But they found that this Cordovan leather had a very raspy surface that was real good for stropping leathers. And they were making up a lot of straps for barbers.
That's right.
When you
With
said
the razor
stropping, I think a lot of people today wouldn't know what stropping is, but in a former time, people used a straight edge razor as a means of shaving before
which
we
the
had...
barber still uses today.
Yeah, before we had rechargeable electric shavers, people used to shave with a sharp straight edge.
Well, the individual man who did not go to the barber, he used what they call the automatic safety razor, which was a razor that you'd put into a narrower piece of leather, and it would slide in, and when you flip it back and forth, and the blade would come up and down as you flipped it, and it would flip down this way, and then we would pull it, flip down that way, and it would pull it, and that would go back and forth. That was called the automatic safety razor.
Automatic as long as you moved.
Yeah, you had a manually automatic. But this made a tremendous hit in the country. And G.W. Whiffenbach was one of the outstanding manufacturers of this strap. My father, having a lot of knowledge of the leathers, was inclined to be very proud of his knowledge and not very secretive about it. I mean, he enjoyed
to tell people.
Telling people about what he could do and what he couldn't do, and people were impressed. And of course, after he showed them what he could do, then it was no secret anymore. And evidently his, I don't know, maybe you'd call it ego, maybe not, but his knowledge had no feeling of suppressing it. He was outgoing with it.
So he didn't believe in patents.
So that's right. And when this factory of Whiffenbach's was successful in its first time, he decided to open up another factory, and Kasper became the superintendent of this factory, which I think was in Watervillette. And they ran a successful operation there. Then there was a lull in between where they came up with a canvas, a treated canvas, which was discovered in the war materials. It substituted for the leather. So this little automatic safety razor, instead of being made out of leather, became made out of a
plastic,
of a cord, like a belt, like these cloth belts.
A web belt
that they used in the army. And I think it was because of this that he was
losing
lost out on the job there, and he went to Elyria, where he was actually a bartender.
That's Elyria.
R-I-A.
And he became a bartender in Elyria?
A bartender. And I remember one of his poems that he used to tell us, something like, what was it? You come to this world all naked and bare. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
You come from where you know not where.
If you're a good fellow here, you'll be a good fellow there.
Something like that, yeah. And that's the way he used to kind of repeat that.
But you know, Rebecca has cousins.
Who's Rebecca, Mom?
Rebecca Reisler. And you know, we're related to them.
How are you related to the Reislers?
Huh?
Oh,
Their
I'd say distant cousins.
Their father and pa are, well, they're maybe third cousins. It's not so distant.
So when you ended up in let's stay with Elyria, Ohio
wait a minute.
now.
There's the Superior Tanners right here.
Yeah, you've told us about it before, Mom.
Well, wait a minute. Now, they weren't any smarter than Pa or anything, but they had luck. And they came here, and they're multimillionaires, you know? They raised all of the...
Okay, Mom. I'm really not interested in that family.
That's true. What happened was, in one particular case, I recall, my dad used to be oftentimes criticizing him on, as my mother, I used to remember as a kid, used to fault him with telling people what he could do and what he would tell them. And at one time there was a era where they used a lot of Russian ponies. The Russian pony skins was used for coats and things like that because they had a nice moire character in the hair with the fur, but there wasn't fur, with the hair on it. And he had a black dye that had an extremely high luster, which they were very pleased with. And they used to watch him doing it, and at that point he became aware of the fact that if he would tell them how it's done, they wouldn't need him anymore. So he told me that when he would be working on the chemicals, he'd have one little piece of material in the finger of his hand that was about the size of a coffee bean, hidden right here in his hand, like this. And after going through all the materials, and actually people were watching him, whatever it is, what he was doing, he would drop this piece of copperus, is what they call this chemical, in the vat. This copperus was the secret of this black, lustrous dye. Took them a long time before they found that out. How they found it out, I don't remember. But this did indicate a fact that he did have the knowledge that he tried to suppress from other people whenever he could. And we'll remember this. We'll remember this statement when we get into a more advanced conversation with the World's War about something that he said he could do in 24 hours that nobody else could do in 3 months. And he said he could do it in 24 hours. Well, this shocked a lot of people because they said it was absolutely impossible. Well, this might be a little bit more advanced than where we want to go, so if there's any other questions you want to
No,
ask.
go ahead.
I want to tell you something. Sammy was talking. I says to Sammy, first of all, you were not even around. You were the last child. You were born in Chicago. He talks like he was born in Ohio or all those different towns that we traveled through. I says, you know, Sam, when it comes to something, you know, maybe because I'm older or I haven't got the money and things that you have or that, or I haven't been trained for I haven't got certain knowledge, but I know what my father went through. Phil knows because Phil started out early to work with Pop. Phil's been with Pop all his life.
All right, well, let's go back to Ohio.
Maybe if he didn't, Phil would have been a very rich man. He was in...
He's a rich man. Look at his family. What else could one want in life?
Well, that's not, I mean, that's all hearsay. I said,
No, but Phil
you're
knows
talking,
more.
I'll tell you, you're talking right now like Sam talks.
So let's
It's not factual.
let's go back to what we were talking
it's
about.
It's assumption.
But you...
Okay, now going back, we were talking about Elyria, Ohio.
Yeah.
That was a time when another child was born, I believe. Is that?
Maxie.
Was he born in Elyria?
Yeah.
Okay.
1:30 at night with a lamp from kerosene.
Yeah. No
And
electricity.
no doctors around or
No
anything.
electricity.
Huh?
No electricity.
No. How
All
did
right,
he-
and Mac is how much younger than you, Phil? Do you know?
Mac is 7 years younger than I am.
Is he
Okay.
7 years younger?
And then Joe is in between.
Wait a minute,
Joe's,
7?
huh?
Yeah, Mac is 7 years.
And
Joe's
where?
only a couple of years
2
younger.
years, 2.5 years, 3 years.
So Joe was born in Watervliet, and that would have been probably sometime in 1909 or 1910.
1909, yeah.
And
1909.
And then Mac would have been born approximately 1912, 14,
I think so, yeah.
sometime in that area. And then there were two children, a Harry
No,
Harry.
that's a baby.
and another child.
Okay.
That was in Michigan City.
All right, but when was Harry born?
Where was Abe born? That's right.
Abe was born in Ohio or Michigan City? Michigan City, and then we moved back.
Wait a minute. Abe was 9 years old. Abe must have been born in Michigan City.
So Abe would have been a later born child. When was Harry born?
He was born before Sammy. He was an infant.
All right,
He
so there were
died a
two
month
children that
old.
were born after Max,
After Max.
and before Libby or after Libby?
Oh, wait.
Oh,
where-
Libby was born in Michigan City.
Yes.
Yeah. We left her out.
Yeah.
She was 11 years young.
Well, Libby was born.
How much younger? Oh,
She was
younger.
Libby. Libby was younger than Abe.
Yeah.
She was younger than Abe.
What about Harry? Harry would have been born before Libby.
Yeah.
Okay. And,
No,
and-
no. No. Libby was born before. Libby was born before Abe. Before Harry. Harry was born after a year before Sam, and Libby is about 2 years older than Sammy.
And there was a brother, Harry.
Yeah.
Now, where would Harry have been in the family?
Harry
Would have been
lived-
after Max?
No, after Sammy.
No, it couldn't be after Sammy.
Before
After-
Sam, a year before Sam.
After either.
Well, wait,
after
you,
Libby-
you said Abe
either
or
after
Harry. Abe or Harry.
Abe was born before Libby.
Okay, and then Harry was born after Libby.
No, yeah. after.
Okay, and Abe died as what
He
reason?
had circumcision.
He had an infection and he died as almost an infant.
At that time, they had what they called a traveling moral, and
Yes,
there was
they
no Jewish people would have to have these morals come to them at certain times because there was living in small towns. There were no accommodations of that kind. Well, evidently this mole was not too particular about being
Clean?
clean, and he had an infection, and it was 30 days later the baby died.
Then you had another brother whose name was
Abraham.
Abe, and Abe was killed in an automobile accident
Yes.
in Michigan City, or
No, Abe was killed in Chicago.
Going up to Long Lake, north. Where, you know where Long Lake is?
he was about 8 or 9.
9 years old.
Oh, we'll see it now.
He was
A
killed,
real
killed in
redhead.
front of my mother's eyes.
So it was a family outing, and he.
Yeah, my cousin Joe was driving the car.
My big
I wasn't there at the time.
That's Joe Kasper.
Yeah, I wasn't there at the time. Mac and Joe were in the car.
Don't bring that
You
up.
were in the car, weren't you?
Yeah.
And Ma.
We wanted to die.
Where was Pa?
I was there too.
Pa was there too.
Yeah. But my mother sat 3 days.
I only got the grief of it from hearing it. But they actually
did
saw
we
it.
go out, was it going out to see you? In Long Lake?
I was out. Yes, I think that was. I think I was on a fishing trip or something like that, and you were coming out to.
Today, Phil, you're wearing a shirt. The shirt says, "I'd rather be fishing."
Yeah.
So fishing has been something that's been a part of your life then for a long, long time.
Well, fishing started. Actually, I do remember exactly what it was. We lived in Michigan City.
Yeah.
In the our house was next to another house, and this fellow used to go fishing quite often. I used to love chickens, and I'd get up early in the morning, and I'd have a little bandy rooster that would be waiting for me to get up. When I'd come up, he would jump on my shoulder. I would feed the chickens, take in the eggs, and I'm saying this here because I got along very well with the chickens.
It's interesting.
And one morning, as I was coming up the stairs, I see Kenneth Fryer. And how how the hell I remember the name? Look at
I
that.
remember his name.
Kenneth Fryer.
Your
And he
best
was a
friend.
middle-aged man.
Oh, boyfriend. Kenneth Fryer was your best boyfriend. Now maybe you think he's middle-aged, but that was your best friend. He lived.
We'll go on with the
We
story.
lived on the
You-
corner, and the house was in the. They lived. We all had a yard
Well,
together.
I don't know. To me, I think it was this way.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, if I don't remember the name, I do remember the details.
Yeah.
He was walking, he went out, and I heard the chickens yelling like hell. And he grabbed one chicken, and as he was coming up the stairs, he wrings its neck.
Oh my God.
And I saw
This is
that.
going to be an X-rated movie.
Yeah. And as I saw that, I began to feel very disappointed in him, as well as disliked him.
he was so.
The next morning, as I was walking down the street, and I got out, walked out of the house, I'll call him Kenneth, says, "Hiya, Phil," and I wouldn't even look at him, I wouldn't turn around to him, and I didn't like him. And I indicated it with just the action, without saying anything to him. And he did that a couple of times, and he finally says, "What's the matter, Phil? Don't you like me?" I said, "I hate you." He says, "Why do you hate me?" I said, "Because you're a chicken killer." And I explained to him what I had seen. He said, well, that's the way we kill chickens. You people have a different way. You call it a shechet,
You know?
whatever it is. He wasn't Jewish. You call him in and he slices their neck. He says, we don't do that way. We had a different way. So he sort of pacified me. At that time, I must have been, I'll guess, 6, 7 years old. And he says, come on. He says, don't be mad at me. He says, well, come on, you want to go fishing with me? So, well, fishing, I never fished before, but we had Washington,
But there's a big park to go to.
yeah, they had a pier, the Washington Pier in Michigan City. So he had the fishing poles in his hand, and I said, okay, I'll go with you. Well, it happened to be a day where the fish were really biting. And when we came home, he was twice as tall as I was. He was holding the front end of the string, and I was holding the back end of the string. And we had a whole string full of fish. Evidently, that's the first feeling I encountered as to fishing. Since then, I have been fishing.
You've still been trying to fill that line again. You've
Yeah, well, I've done it many times.
Oh, okay.
I have done it many times. I've had repeat performances.
I've seen a lot of pictures with you, and it seems you're always stretching the line a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's a fisherman's habit, long hands, you know.
Get up.
So that's how fishing became something that was very important to
Yeah.
you as it went
Every
on.
time you'd go fishing, you would take me with him, and I'd always go.
Now, growing up in a small town like Michigan City and maybe even Elyria, do you have any memories of what it was like being?
It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. We had the dunes there, which was very hilly, a very
That's
hilly
Michigan
area.
City.
And as kids, you know, kids like to romp around. We used to go into these hills and hunt for rabbits and all types of animals and snakes and things of that sort. I remember one time we were hunting for rabbits, and we had a way. Of course, there were some older kids there, and I, being smaller, would follow their pattern. They would find a inlet to the rabbit's house, and not too far away, they would look for the outlet, because they can only burrow underground for a certain length of time. And the outlet would be hidden in another secluded area. And when we would hunt for them, what we would do, we would build a fire in front of one hole and have a gunny sack behind the other, holding it. And we would make the smoke go into the hole and smoke out the animal, and he'd come running out of the other side and into the gunny sack, and we would grab the gunny sack and we had him. Of course, we never ate rabbits, but the Gentiles did love rabbits. So they were always in demand, and when they brought them home, why, they ate the rabbits. We lived in one little house there at the time.
Near the water?
We had a little bit of a farm right near the water, yeah. And in those, there was outdoor plumbing. The outdoor plumbing. We had a two-seater, that they called.
Two-seat toilet?
Yeah,
That was used by the whole family?
that's right. There was no.
I had to go out there too.
Yeah.
Or did we have something in the
The
house?
two-seater.
Toilet?
There was a guy who wrote a book on that by the name of Chase. What the heck, I forget what
The
the hell it was all
Chase
about.
family?
No, Chase is his name. He wrote something very funny and very amusing about the two-seaters. Well, of course,
Wasn't
those
Chase
used to.
in Michigan
There was
City?
a Chase in Michigan City, yeah, but this was a book.
When we were,
This was a
was
book.
I a little girl in Michigan City?
Mhm.
Huh?
Yeah.
I've met a lawyer whose name is...
The boys used to annoy you a lot.
They wanted to pull my pants off
Right.
on
Right.
Halloween, and I hollered, I said, if you ever touch me,
Well,
I said, you'll be the last guy living here.
they were a lot of Gentiles. We were the only Jewish family, and of course, I remember the
They
name
used to like to
Sheeny.
tease
I
you.
remember the name Sheeny called quite often. I got into plenty of battles with a lot of different fellows because of their
But they
anti-Semitic
didn't
attitudes.
hurt them.
And
Half a couple, maybe
went
more
to
than a
school there, and behind this
One.
house, this is where I had that little chicken farm. we had a harbor that ran into Lake Michigan. At the corner of this harbor, there was a crossroad with a bridge. The bridge was turned manually. There was a big square pivot in the middle of the bridge, a big square nut like shaft. And then they had a big long pipe that was almost 10 feet long, bent to fit over this square. And everybody would come and get a piece of this here 10-foot pipe and walk around and turn the wheel on this bridge, and that would turn the bridge and open it up so that whatever was going through could go through. And then they would turn it back.
That was called an automatic turner.
Did they have smoke fish around there that they made?
Yeah.
Fresh smokers?
But this bridge used to have a bell on it, and the bell would be rung by whoever had to go through, and all of us kids would come running and get a lot of fun out of helping turn the bridge.
So it was like a community activity.
It was. It was. It was all volunteer. I remember one time, one Halloween, where we took some 2x4s and nailed them against the outhouses, which was set on top of a hole. And these 2x4s would extend beyond the length of the outhouse. And 6 kids would grab each end, 4 of us or so, and lift up the outhouse from its position and take it someplace else. So when the neighbors woke up in the morning, the outhouse was gone. That was one of the tricks of the way of the average kid's mind.
That was a
I heard a lot about turning chicken coops over and things like that. Did that ever happen, or wasn't that part of what you did?
Well, I don't remember doing anything like that.
When I was a young boy, we used to do that as recently as my lifetime. There were chicken stores, and we would go behind the chicken stores on Halloween, and we would take the chicken coops and transport them some distance away, because the man who ran the chicken store wasn't too nice to us during the non-Halloween time. So everybody had their way of pulling these little pranks.
Yeah.
And I think the idea today, when kids go and announce trick or treat, there isn't any issue of any tricking. It's just a matter of holding your hand out and getting your candy or sweet stuff. But in your day, there were real tricks, and that's what the trick or treat. So we're going to start again, and as you've told me while we were off camera, you've kind of enjoyed talking about this a little in the way of reminiscence. We've had a reasonably close tie over the years with some family in Ohio, and maybe you can reminisce a bit about your awareness of cousins like Sadie and Mary. Tell me who they are and what their relationships, as you remember. The Widzer family. Do you recall how they were related?
Well, our family tree tells us a lot of things in there, in the relationship of the
Interfamily marriages?
marriages between the Kaspers, the Widzers, the Beckers. It's pretty difficult to remember just how, because every time there's a marriage, it's 2 families, and one family is so distant from the actual intimate family that you don't sometimes go into that. You don't meet people that are from the other side at all, you know.
But basically, since your family did live in Ohio and in Indiana, you had occasion either to meet or to learn that they were living in those communities. And over the years, that progressed from the 1920s up until the late 1970s. You had a fairly close relationship, a continuing relationship with the Widzer Becker family.
Yeah.
And I think
especially Sadie's father was very fond of my father. My father had a lot of very strong friendships with the relatives. Max Flatt used to think he was an outstanding mind. Opinions and different things like that used to be asked of him. And there was several cousins in Michigan, in an area, in the Becker family, and what the heck was this here?
Well, Sadie's father.
Hatsko.
Haskell, and was there a Cayudel? Shayudel?
Shayudel.
Shayudel was a woman.
No, Shayudel was I believe, Sadie's father.
I see. This is the man who was close to your father, Shayudel?
Yes, and Hatsko was also, I think he was a brother to Shayudel, Hatsko.
And this would have been Sadie Tucker
Sadie Tucker.
Lieberman's father,
Yeah.
if you remember.
Yeah.
There was a Sam Becker. I remember him as a young person in my life. Who was Sam Becker? If you remember.
Sam Becker, I think, was Shayudel.
Was that the name?
That was her father, I think, was Sam Becker.
So Shayudel would have been his Hebrew, or Yiddish name.
Yeah, they were always called, I never remembered their, but my father used to lean towards mostly the Hebrew names, the Jewish names, rather than the English names.
So your father was called Laser.
Laser, yeah.
And he had a sister who was, as we said earlier, the parent of Leah Flatt.
The Schwartzes, what's her name? Schwartz.
Now I'm unable to fill that one in.
Coming in from Africa.
Oh, Frida Strauss.
Frida Strauss, not Schwartz.
Now
Strauss.
Frida was one of Leah. Leah Flatt.
Sister to my father.
Yeah, Leah. Now I can refresh your memory and mine. Your father's sister was Tanti Lena. Tanti Lena was the mother of Frida Strauss and Joseph Karam, who were originally, after leaving the Soviet Union, went to Balawago, then South Rhodesia, which is now called Zimbabwe.
They were brothers and sisters?
Yes, Strauss and Karam.
Oh.
And then they went on, Karam went to South Africa, Johannesburg, and he was also in the leather business. And he visited, I'm thinking now of Joseph Karam coming and spending a night at your house with his second wife about 15 years ago.
Yes, I can use all of that.
You remember that visit?
Sure.
And Frida Strauss, you recall?
Yeah.
Frida now lives in Israel with her two sons, Morris and Simon. She's a widow. And Lena was your father's sister, your Tanti Lena. And I, as I was telling my mother, had the occasion to meet both my grandmother Jenny and my grandfather Laser, or Louis, separate sisters on the same day in Israel. I met in 1979 or 1978, I met Mirka, who was the younger sister of my grandmother and your mother Jenny, and I met Lena, who was the younger sister of your father Louis, my grandfather, in Israel on the same day, and neither family knew each other. And I was able to spend a short time with each of them, and unfortunately both have now passed away. But it was like a tie to a history, because my Tanti, great aunt, your aunt Mirka, saw my grandmother, your mother, while she was pregnant with my mother, and then left the United States at Ellis Island and was returned to Russia, where she spent the entire Second World War. And a very unusual event in my life was when I walked into your Tanti Mirka's apartment in a town called Petah Tikva in Israel, and in the wall of her, on the wall in her bedroom was two pictures, in addition to a picture of Ben Gurion. There was a picture of my mother and father's wedding, and the picture that you were holding of the Kasper family that your mother had sent to her, and that she had carried with her as possessions throughout her life in the
Second World War, and
Now,
her.
this was my mother's sister?
Tanti Murka.
My
Remember?
mother's sister.
You're the one who gave me the address on Murka and said if I was going to Israel, I'd have to find her. And we had an address and we traced it down. Now
What happened to the boys?
she had, Murka had a daughter, Ida, who also had a brother. And the brother has remained in the Soviet Union, and that would be your first cousins. And he was an officer in the Soviet Army, and is a non-practicing Jew, and married a non-Jewish woman, and decided to stay in the Soviet Union, where he retired. I'm not sure whether he's still alive, because I'm talking 10 years ago. But at that time I met Ida, who would be your first cousin. Her Yiddish name was Itka, and she had a son his name was Zev, Z-E-V, and I believe the married name was Zezersky, Z-E-Z-E-R-S-K-I, and they went to New York City, or New York the state, and settled in Brooklyn. And they called once or twice and almost came to Chicago about 8 or 9 years.
It was just a neighborhood ride or something.
And then they realized it was a 1,100-mile round one way, and.
But in that time, there was also this Joseph that used to constantly write to my mother, and she always used to manage to send him money.
And that was a survivor of the Holocaust that lived in either Poland or Israel?
No, he lived in Israel.
In Israel. No, we've never had any further contact with him.
Two brothers, well, evidently they're, when the second brother came in, one was David and one was Joseph. The first one was a school teacher and used to write about his family, and he was very, very nice about everything that he seemed to write about. He used to tell us about how hard it was for him to get along, and plenty of times my mother, either through me or through, what was her girlfriend's name? Her son was a broker. A big, very Slavish type of kid.
It's not very flattering, Uncle Phil.
That, Yetta.
Oh, you mean Schwab?
Yetta Schwab. And her, what's her son's name?
Seymour.
Seymour Schwab, yeah. She used to do a lot of writing because my mother couldn't write. And she used to do a lot of correspondence. She knew more about the things that my mother did, not knowing from any of us, but taking money what you would often need on the table, which she didn't have too much of, and sending to him.
So she became the Scrivener, the writer, and in that capacity, both as she was also a landsman of Grandma, Mrs. Schwab, and she wrote the letters in Hebrew or Yiddish and sent them to your mother's nephew. Is that who he was?
Yeah, that's right. Now, when the other brother came in from Russia or something, he came in and he, through some misunderstanding, whatever it was under the impression that everybody in America was very, very wealthy and that he had a very wealthy family. And he wrote telling us what hardships he had and if we couldn't help him. And we sent him money constantly until one time we got a letter, and he actually said in a letter, he says, sending me $10 bills, $15 bills is a drop in the bucket. I can't do anything with this kind of thing. I'm a shoemaker. I would like to open up a shoe store. I would need money to open up and buy machinery so I can open up a shoe store. Well, we were just skimping by at that time with the fur business, whatever it was, and we couldn't help him. There was a Suvalker organization.
That was an organization based in Chicago, of people who had been so-called landsmen in the old country.
Right. And they went back and they, through my mother or whatever it was, got the names of these people and they visited them in Israel, and they were told that when we get to Chicago, and somehow or other, I mean, the Kasper family was always judged as being better off than what we were. Because we managed to live and do things that other people couldn't do, just like on our fishing trips, as you know. What would cost somebody else $2,000-3,000 would cost us $500-600, and we'd have 10 guys doing it. Because we ate differently and we enjoyed ourselves. We didn't go to expensive places, and this is the way I grew up. Because I didn't get back to the time when we came in from Michigan City to Chicago to indicate some of the hardships that I went through with my father, which we can never forget, because at that time it was a war times.
Which war was this now?
This was the First World War.
So, okay.
It was 1918, 1919, 1920. My dad was left out of the tannery in Michigan City, of which he was the superintendent, had a pretty nice job there, also at the Whiffenbach family. But G.W. Whiffenbach, that was the last tannery that my dad operated for him. So when we couldn't make a living in a city like Michigan City, we had to move. He thought he'd been moved to Chicago, where he could, a big city, he can always make a living. And he tried getting into different places with his knowledge of letters and so forth, and he couldn't. And having a family that needed to eat every day with a bunch of kids, he went out and he tried doing some peddling. He'd rent a horse and wagon. In those days, there used to be peddlers going through the alleys with vegetables, picking up rags and iron. Well, at first he didn't have money to buy vegetables, because then you have to have an outlet, but renting a horse and picking up rags and iron, that was something else again, that he was doing. And I'd sit on the wagon along his side of him, and he would go through the alley and crying, or not crying, but yelling, "Old rags, old iron, old rags, old iron," to let people know that their junk man is here, and they would come out and call him in once in a while. And
Well, he was one of the first of the commodities brokers.
commodities brokers, right. And then we later on got into vegetables, and I remember in disgust one time, as he was calling out rags and iron, he let out an outburst, and he thought it was very funny at that time. He says, "Dreckle iron, you know, Dreckle iron."
What does dreck mean?
Dreck means a lot of crap.
Oh, okay.
And he was leaving that out because that was just an expression of his heart, how hard it was for him to make a living to support the family. And
How old were you then?
at that time I was 9, 10, 11 years old.
Were you being educated as a Jewish child at that time?
Not too much.
Was
Not
your
too
father a very religious
My
man?
father was a religious man to the extent that he wasn't really an Orthodox, but he was a religious man.
How do you define that? What did you see about his life that made you think?
Well, whenever it came to a holiday, he was very observant of every holiday that came by. He would go to shul, and of course, he would always pick on me because you're the oldest son. So everything that he would do, he had some shortcomings, he would leave it out on me because I was the oldest and I was supposed to know. When it came to a time where we got a job, the first thing that my dad never knew anything about furs, but we got a job at one time with a company called Ruderman, who made cloaks and suits and used fur collars on their cloaks and suits. Well, he got a job there, and not knowing anything at all about furs, it was quite basically simple. You would take the skin and cut it in half and sew the two back ends together, and then have a pattern and nail the collar out on the pattern, and that would make your collar. You tape it and so on. And I was with him at the time, so naturally as a youngster you pick up different ideas and knowledge about the things, so we kept pretty busy with this fur collars. from Ruderman. Well, this was about in 1922, 1923. And at least he was seeing a little bit of light of day. We'd have a hard time collecting our salary every week from Ruderman because he was one of the, during those days they had the, what we called the sweatshops. And if he could get away with it, why, they would tell you they haven't got any money and pay you next week and so forth and hold you off. But we were pretty strict on that because he knew that there was a family that had to be supported. So we always fought Ruderman every week to get our check.
Did you get a check or did you get money?
Well, money, whatever it was. I know, I remember a check because he couldn't sign his name. This man was so ignorant. He had a big Bolvanish son who was running the business with a big cigar in his mouth. But Ruderman had to sign the check, and the only thing he knew was he would make 10 strokes up and down with the fountain pen, and that was it. He didn't make no X or anything like that because after being a businessman, it didn't look nice to make an X, but he learned how to make 10 straight up and down strokes, and that's the way he signed his name, with these 10 strokes. Came 1924, the union stepped in, there was a strike, and they left everybody go. Well, we didn't belong to the union, and we thought we would be able to work, but as long as it was the company, they made us go out with the rest of them. We had no job. So not having a job, of course, put us back in a bad position. The few dollars that we had been able to save, we found a space over on Halsted and Roosevelt. There was a Schiff's Bank, and upstairs of the Schiff Bank was a loft.
Now you're talking an area at Roosevelt and Halsted, which today is considered to be like Maxwell Street, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's only a
Maxwell
block.
Street at that time was very big. You know,
It was a retail market place.
There was a lot of manufacturers, and Turner Brothers was on the corner in different companies. West Roosevelt, and I got acquainted through the Schiff's Bank of a company that was on what's your 12th and what? Was that Halsted? 12th and
I think
Halsted?
in 12th and Halsted.
There was Morgan Street.
Yeah, that was Halsted, sure. 12th and Halsted. The 12th Street Bank was on 12th and Halsted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got a hold of a company that was on Halsted Street that was making collars and cuffs, but a bigger operator than Ruderman used to be. And we got connected with him, and being that we were contractors for collars and cuffs, he became interested. Now, at that time, there was a fur, Australian opossum, was being used. And this Mr. Hyman said that he would like those Australian opossum, but everybody's using them natural. Could they be dyed black or could they be dyed brown? Well, my father, having the knowledge of dyes, said sure, he could. This was the start of something that the first chance he had of getting back into his own knowledge. And I remember going out, we bought a used drum at that time, and he dyed up, we got a lot of these are skins in from Minnesota, and we dyed up the Australian opossum in dark browns and in blacks and so forth. And we were successful in getting these colors, so we did a pretty fair amount of business. At least we were making a living and not doing any work for Ruderman anymore. We were working for Hyman.
Not yourself.
So no, well, this was our own business, yeah. Then, as we started doing this here, my father mentioned to me, and being a young kid, I must have been about 12 years old at that time, he said that there's places that we ought to go to instead of Halsted Street. Why don't we go into the market? So I said, well, let's go. So my father, being kind of timid about going into people, pushed me into it. Gay, do bass, and always go, gay, do bass.
And how old were you?
I was 12 years old then. And, of course, I had a knack for doing things. I remember at that time we lived on 12th in Roosevelt, huh? Not 12th. What was the street? Trip. Not Trip.
12th Street.
No, 12th near,
Seven,
the 12th in the
the
Spalding?
first place, Spalding, that's it. That's what I'm trying to think of. So, North Spalding.
The 1259.
1259, something like that, yeah. On Spalding.
Only down further.
And, well, being that I come from a small town and I knew a little bit about bicycles and things of that sort, I often remember the incidents where we would be talking about bikes and these kids couldn't afford bikes. So I said, well, why don't we do what I used to do in Michigan City? We'd go to the junkyards and pick up bicycles and put them together. I knew all about the new departure brakes, and I knew all about the wheels and all that kind of stuff, how to tighten the spokes and the spoke wrenches. So I became the neighborhood mechanic for all these kids for their bicycles.
That was a time when there weren't too many automobiles either.
Not too many automobiles.
People used carts and horses.
There was a family across the street by the name of Combs.
Oh yeah, Benny Cone.
Benny Cone, Maxie Cone, and whenever their older brothers were cab drivers, and they would come home for lunch, and they would leave their yellow cabs in front of the house, and mischievous as we were fooling around with the yellow cabs, and they got the nerve to drive them around the block. And we drove the cars around the block.
Kids.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, Maxie Cone and I became kind of interested in fixing up cars from that.
He turned out to be a handsome kid.
Oh yeah. And we were pretty good. We would take the entire Fords apart and fix the brakes. Benny was a little older than I was, and Maxie was younger. And we fixed the brakes and we overhauled the bearings. There was nothing to take a car apart. It was we could put it together pretty good. We bought a few old cars. I had a Jeffrey, I had a Ford, and
the oldest thing.
we played around and we were real alley mechanics. In fact, is from that alley mechanic, Maxie Cone got a job with Lewis on Ogden Avenue, which was his first job as a mechanic, and he had a lot of friends, and they would come in and buy cars and ask Maxie to look the car over. Lewis took an interest in Maxie, and he says, why don't you come into the sales room and do selling instead of being a mechanic? And that started Maxie on his career as an automobile salesman.
Interesting event.
Rich
Now,
man.
now
Didn't he
it-
die?
Yeah, Maxie died.
Oh, too bad.
He
He was a handsome man.
From Spalding Avenue, of course, we were in very bad condition at that time. My mother, there was an epidemic of influenza. Dr. King was our doctor, and she was on the verge of death practically with the flu. And he pulled her through, and she always had a very strong liking for King. He was our family doctor, a real friend of the family.
Wonderful.
We all loved him.
So good to us. Didn't have no money.
Now, Sam was born at this time, because he was born in Chicago.
Yeah, Sam was born right around this time.
And about when was Sam born? Do you remember the year?
I would say that Sam was born about 19, let's see, Sam, 67, 20. 1920, 1922, 24.
He was a baby. I
you
got
see,
the
60s.
picture. Oh, I'm there. The picture of Libby and Manny, of Libby.
Well, if that picture was taken when you were 17 years old, and Sam was in that picture.
Yeah, Sammy's in that picture. I was working for Irving Mann, or
Yeah, but I'm just trying to get the specifics there when trying to remember.
And I bought him that's the first.
Mom, you told us about it.
No, but he don't remember. I bought that first
The sailor
sailor
suit.
suit in all wool. And I bought Libby that little fawn dress. We were going to a wedding. So that's how we took that picture. Whose wedding we were going to. And Libby was as thin as a rail. When she was 15 years old, was she beautiful. But she
Philip, where did you go to school?
First I went to Lawson Grammar School.
Where was that? In
That
Chicago?
was on 15th and Turner.
So did you go to school in Michigan City? Do you remember?
No. No.
You must have.
I may have gone to kindergarten or something on there because I do have a vague recollection of some activities around the school. Winter sports, playing out around the snow and stuff like that. It must have been because I was 9 years old when I came to Chicago.
To Chicago.
So I must have been going to school there before.
So you went to Lawson Elementary School in Chicago.
Lawson Elementary, and then I went to Marshall High.
All right.
2 years of Marshall High, and then I had to quit. Because we weren't making a living, we couldn't continue.
You didn't finish Marshall High?
No.
No problem.
No.
How are you so bright?
He learned a lot in 2 years. Took a fast
Marshall
accelerator.
I always thought.
And at that time, it was just in about this time that we're talking about with the furs.
Uh-huh.
And from the dying of the furs, I had a little sort of, always had the ability of improvising. Even as a kid, I would take clocks apart and things of that sort, and I could always, if something was missing, I could put in a part that didn't belong and it would still work. And to this day, I'm what I would call an improviser. When the furs were started to get popular as collars and cuffs, and we were, after all, we were just a small factor in the collar and cuff business. We had this here place, and at that time my uncle Udall wanted to come to the United States, and of course everybody thought the Kaspers were wealthy, you know, taking care of a family and everything else, but we lived from mouth to mouth. And I remember Mr. From the Liberty National Bank on Halsted and 12 used to like me as a boy, and he used to talk to me, and I remember one of the things once I was standing there talking with him, and he says, "You see that scrub lady over there?" And I says, "Yeah." He says, "When that woman talks, listen, because you might learn something from her." He says, "Nobody knows everything." He says, "But listen to everybody." And they had a big slogan at that time which said, "A part of what I earn belongs to me." And he was the first one that told me, "You go to the bank with your $5 bills once a week. Let your friends go to the bank with their $20 bills once a month. At the end of the year, you will have $5 in the bank every week. They won't have the $20 to put in the bank every month because they can't afford to put in $20. You only think that you're going to do it tomorrow. But when that $20 comes around the end of the month, you're just as bad off as you were in the beginning. But your $20 is already in the bank."
Okay, $5.
He taught me that. A part of what you earn belongs
Which
to me.
bank was that?
That was the Liberty National Bank.
Oh.
What was his name? It was an Irish name, Mr. Kelly or something like that. I forget what it was. Well, anyhow, one of the turnarounds of going into the fur business was when I happened to meet a young man who was older than I was by the name of Sam Fader.
Fader. I remember.
Fader Cloaks and Suits. A father and son operated business with a sister. They're real sharp people. But I mean shrewd Jewish people. Sam was a dynamo. He was a guy who was dedicated completely to his business. He thought nothing else except making money. And he liked me because he thought I knew a lot about furs, which I pretended to know, and he believed me.
That's good.
The great imposter.
Yeah. So, and we were making, he says, Phyllis, I want you to make some
What'd you
wolf.
got?
Listen to this.
Yeah.
I want you to make some wolf collars for me.
Wolf.
He said, I need a couple hundred wolf collars.
They were cheap.
And the wolf skin, I mean, as little as you might know about the furs, I figured that there was only one way to do it, and that was to cut the skin in half and use one half for one coat and the other half for the other coat. And for cuffs, we would cut up a skin for two pair of cuffs. And we made some collars like this. I must have made maybe 50 or 100 collars. He says, something is wrong. They're not the collars that they're getting out of New York. And I couldn't figure out what the hell it was that we were doing wrong. And nobody to ask, because everything came out of New York then. Meantime, we were accumulating a lot of wolf tails and wolf pieces and throwing them into the corner. We couldn't get rid of them. So the corner kept getting bigger. One day, Sam come in and says, Phil, he says, we got a hell of a big order. He says, but I'm sorry, I can't take your collars and cuffs. They're not what we're supposed to have. What we want to make. He says, something you're not doing right. I said, well, I'll have to work on it and see what I'm doing wrong. He says, and I got a man by the name of Herman Waits who's got 1,000 wolves that he wants to sell me. And I want you to look at them for the quality. Again, I say I didn't know anything about furs, but he thought I did. We went over there, and I was particularly interested in the wolves being long enough to make the length of the collar. Went over, now look at the wolves. They were very reasonable, but they were small. And I said to Waits, we can't use these, they're too small. He said, what do you mean small? They'll make a collar and cuff. He said, that's what they're for. I said, how the heck are you going to get a collar and cuff out of them?
Could you
And
use
listen to
what
this.
you had?
He goes like this, with his finger. The skin is laying there. He says, why, there's your collar and there's your cuff. When he did that, it was just like an electric bulb burst in my head. And all of a sudden, I got very impatient and I couldn't wait
Till he got
to
out.
try what I just thought I found out.
All those people.
So I said to Sam, Sam, why don't we buy 10 skins for a trial and see how it will come out? And Waits agreed to give us 10 skins. I ran back to the shop and I split the skin,
You were smart.
took it, made an X to the middle, took the rear end of the skin and brought the two rear ends together, joining them in the center, which when they put the collar on, both sides were alike. My way, the head was here and the rump was there, so that's what I didn't like. And this one, all of a sudden, you got two rumps, split this cuff in half, the cuffs matched perfectly, and I was jumping for joy. I call up Sam, I says, Sam, I
I
think we got it. So he comes over and he says, these look real good, and he got impatient and he started he says, make me up a half a dozen, use up all the skins and see what's what. Well, later on, with Sam, just to give you an idea of the man's energy, he was one of the first men who would fly 1,000,000 miles a year. And it was nothing for him to travel 3 different cities in a day by plane, by car, very fast. Tremendous energy. Nobody could work for him because he wanted everybody to be like him. He got some of the top salesmen, he'd work a week and he'd fire them. And I used to say, Sam, everybody can't be like you. This man is good. He's not good enough for me. But he come back, that after those samples were made, he come back, he says, we got an order for 1,000 coats.
To you? Oh,
That
boy.
means 1,000 collars. He's the
Yeah.
manufacturer of the coats.
I understand.
And, we were I remember those days because those were the happy days, you might say. From the constant suffering, all of a sudden, he hit a jackpot. And he come back and he sold those 1,000, he put on help, he put in more machinery, he took an extra loft, he subcontracted,
See, he helped.
and
That's why he was good. He was very fast, but he still wanted to help you to do things.
well, I mean, we were very, very easy to work with each other.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
And he started getting big. And at that time, when we were doing this kind of work, we were able to bring in my Uncle Udall from Europe and put him to work for us. Of course, when he came, Udall was the kind of a guy that if he did something, he was very quiet. He never talked, very stolz.
Yeah.
If he did something, he always had the feeling that he's doing it. Nobody tells you what to do. He's doing it. See? And he started acquiring certain knowledge in the fur business. And we'd get into discussions and so forth and so on. And then we got into the sealing business, and I started making sealing coats.
What is sealing?
Sealing is rabbit fur dyed into a seal. Northern seal.
And you called it what?
Sealing. Seal-line. At that time, muskrats was the top. Muskrat, Hudson seal, I should say, was the dyed muskrat. And Hudson seal was the most important fur in the fur business. Everything was Hudson seal. And I learned how to make Hudson seal in my own way from watching and opening up coats and looking to see how they made it and what they did. And then I began. My dad knew nothing about these things, but he was not a furrier. But
Did he
I
help
learned
you
how to
with
make
it?
zigzags. And my dad was, in a lot of ways, was very much on the order of Joe. You'd show them a way, they would accept it, and that's locked in up to that point. I was different, and I'm that way with my golf. I'm still learning, trying, experimenting with my golf game at my age. I'm never satisfied with a certain specific thing when I can know that somebody else is doing something. And same way with fishing. I mean, I don't have no locked-in way of fishing. I fish with anticipation and experimental all the time. And this was the nature of myself with the fur business. Not knowing anything about a pattern, how to make a coat, all right, I thought I knew something about the furs. I decided the only thing to do is to go out and learn how to make patterns. So I took a course in the Master Designing Corporation, the Staten Lake building, a Polish man there, and he was dressmaking. He dressmaking patterns. But furs, the pattern was no different, just to apply a fur knowledge to the pattern knowledge. And I still got my diploma in 1925, this I remember.
Go on.
I still got my diploma of fur designing, Master School of Fur Designing, Philip Kasper, 1925.
The Wonder Blooms wanted you to make patterns for them. Huh? When did
So-
they find that out?
Who?
Blooms on Michigan Avenue.
I never.
Oh, sure. Later.
Well, I mean, the little incidents that come up with pattern making, that was something else
No,
again.
no.
But this all came up from picked up knowledge. And then I started making some coats on my patterns, and of course we did pretty good
How
with
did
them.
Mac get into that then?
Mac was in the insurance business.
But how did he learn to get into the...
Mac has an aptitude. Mac
Yeah.
has a very strong aptitude for doing things in a lot of ways. Joe does not have that aptitude. Joe is smarter than both of us.
Go on.
Joe is smarter than both of us from a certain form of intelligence. Joe is a very intelligent person. He's handicapped by being a poor man.
You think so?
Absolutely. I find myself at
Well,
fault
no,
many times because he blamed me for all the years that he worked, and I, not once but maybe 1,000 times, says, Joe,